Since everybody's pitching in the latest season of Love is Blind, since my partner as a psychologist kind of gets something out of watching light TV, some psychoanalysis, and some learning. I'm also very much into the human mind and how people operate, and as a person who's also into personal growth and psychology, I also get something out of it. So let me start off by saying that I'm not doing this just to be hypercritical of people that I've watched for a short time on TV that have been edited to show like their worst moments. I'm pretty sure that all of us could be caught out in our worst moments if any of us were on the show, and I'm not separating myself from them in reality. I'm sure that they're all semi-decent people, and if we were to meet them in person, we would not really have that much of a problem with them. But of course, relationships bring out the worst in us, especially in a situation that is so heated where you meet people in pods and then you meet them in person and you don't really have a chance to get any closure, and you are committed to somebody like very fast, and there's a lot of pressure, and then you have to meet their family right away, and all these things are obviously designed to cause a reaction, bring out their worst, and then make it entertaining for us. I empathize, and at the same time, as a viewer, we have our reactions, we have our triggers, and I think that is kind of a personal growth opportunity, because I think that anything that can bring a reaction out of me is an opportunity for me to see myself better and get to know myself better. Kind of going through my thoughts and insights and what bothered me and what affected me, what triggered me and what didn't, what did I feel strongly about that other people didn't, which is, by the way, what I'm focusing on with these points in this video. It really gets us to realize, it helps us to realize what our values are and what our morals are based around, or what are our code of ethics when it comes to relationships, intimate relationships, commitment, monogamy, and how we relate to people, how we believe people should be treated, how we want to be treated, and what things like affect other people. And it's also interesting to see that a lot of people are triggered by the same things, and that's kind of like a feeling of relief as well when I'm really triggered by something that I see on one of these shows, and I go online and I see that actually other people are also triggered by those same things, which means that there's kind of a unanimous feeling that, you know, some kind of deceit or betrayal is wrong. I can see videos where people have really focused on things that bothered them, affected them, and they're not really things that were commonly spoken about by others, and that is just their specific issue. People make these videos, they talk about their reactions, and it really shows a lot about really who that person is who's talking, and that watching some of the feedback and the criticism from other people, I recognize some of my behaviors in some of the people on the show. And it's interesting when I listen to the feedback from maybe therapists or other people that are making videos about the latest season, and really looking at myself and thinking, oh my god, like I didn't really realize that was a problem, and that maybe I would behave that way in a relationship, and that is very insightful for me. So for that reason, I'm going to make my contribution, and here we go. The couples of focus are SK and Raven, currently very much so, Bartise and Nancy, Cole, and Zainab. I also, though, had a real problem with Brennon and Alexa's relationship, and this is the thing. Just because the couples stay together at the reunion, it doesn't mean that the relationship is like okay, or is that it's a success. Just because they're okay with each other, it doesn't mean that long term there are not some real issues that need to be looked at. I did feel like at the reunion there was a lot of focus on the couples who had decided not to stay together, or are therefore considered like some kind of failure. I know that the hosts, Nick and his wife, whose name I never remember, they really want to validate, you know, I guess, the concept of the show, and it's just BS. We all know that there's a lot resting on physical attraction. There's been this issue with multiple people on the show, and I don't really blame them. I think that if you're gonna spend the rest of your life with somebody, I mean, you can just never have sex with them again and never have to kiss them if you don't feel physical attraction that makes you want to do so. But I do believe that you want to explore your sexuality with the person that you're married to. Otherwise, you're gonna just never explore your sexuality with anybody else if you're in a monogamous relationship. And so it's important that you want to explore your sexuality with that person, and not because you love their personality, but because you physically are attracted to them. So love is blind. I mean, love is blind, but sexuality is not blind. it rests on physical attraction. It rests on some kind of chemical attraction that you really only get to become aware of when you do see somebody physically, or you get to feel their energy. And so we know the concept doesn't fly when it comes to most people in reality, just because they choose relatively attractive people, and some people, they're happy with that, with the personality and everything else. It doesn't mean that it works for everybody, and it doesn't mean that those people are shallow. It just means that the chemistry didn't work out for them, and then some of the people who chose to stay together, the chemistry did work out for them, and that's great. So a lot was not said about Brennon and Alexa's relationship, and for me, I was constantly triggered by the fact that Brennon was such a yes man, that he was willing to do absolutely everything. And one thing that was mentioned in one of the comments that I saw in another video on the reunion, which really did bother me, was Brennon acting like a white knight and stepping in, interfering on Cole's interaction with Zainab from a pedestal which he had put himself onto, as if he's like this perfect man, when in reality being a yes man is also not being a perfect man, because who knows down the road what Brennon is going to get up to. Nobody is that cooperative and that perfect and that flexible unless they've got something else going on. I don't really trust Brennon as somebody who is willing to change, sacrifice everything, be completely flexible, take a lot of shit from Alexa, and never say no. I don't trust somebody who never says no, because it seems kind of manipulative. It seems like dishonest, that he's not being 100% himself. He's not showing his true personality. He's not setting any boundaries. He's like willing to let Alexa dress him up like a doll, talking about how she wants to change the way he dresses. And the thing that just worried me the most was this contract, which was a part of their religion or something, but he's not from that religion and he hadn't grown up to accept that. And this prenuptial agreement stated that in the event of a divorce, he's going to continue to finance her life for the rest of her life. This is ridiculous. I've never heard this before in my entire life. Maybe if you grew up in that religion and that culture and you were willing to accept that, maybe there's some more to it that I don't understand, but otherwise it wouldn't make sense that if he was to divorce her and get married to somebody else, why he should continue to finance her life. I mean, what if she marries somebody else and then now she has two men financing her life? It just doesn't really make sense. I mean, I'm not sure that they showed the complete thing, but there was like no reaction to it. I don't understand if it's like, if he divorces her and she's had his children, that he continues to like pay child support, but like she has she's a modern woman. She has her own career. I think she makes more money than Brennon, if not the same. Why should he continue this tradition of financing her life? So I really don't understand why he would agree to this prenuptial agreement. It doesn't seem like something a modern woman would require. It doesn't seem right that he would agree to this. It's unfair. I personally am not a traditional person, and I don't agree with a lot of these things that are logical, but people keep doing them because it benefits them. And I think that they're flexible on traditions when it doesn't benefit them, and then when it benefits them, they want to hold on to those traditions. It's very like double standards. So I had a problem with the fact that Brennon was agreeing to this. I also did have a problem with SK and Raven, you know, with Raven going out with the women in his family and then being told by them that she needs to always make sure there's food, and she needs to like humble herself, meaning that she needs to sit at his feet and treat him like he is above her in some way in status. For sure they would like agree with this, but this is their terminology. The concept they would agree with, yes, she needs to treat him as if he's like more important, he's the most important because he's the man. This is like so outdated. And like, why would you come on a show where you're gonna marry somebody that is not from your culture and then try to pressure them to become part of your culture? Like, she has her own culture as an American woman, as a modern American woman. So why doesn't he adapt to her culture? What is it with people from traditional cultures always assuming that if they marry somebody who's liberal and modern, that they need to like integrate into their culture, which they've grown up with, but this other person is free, and why should they become a part of that? It's not really something that for me shows that they care about you or whatever. For me, it shows that you don't care about them. Because if you want to marry somebody who's part of that culture, then marry somebody who's already part of that culture. Don't marry somebody else and then ask them to change drastically and give up their freedoms and privileges and liberation and ask them to become somebody else. I think that that's completely unfair. I think it was kind of pointed out, but I also think that a lot of people are afraid to speak out about culture and religion because they think that it's going to be considered like ignorant or discriminatory in some way. But at the end of the day, I don't have a problem with anybody choosing their religion, but I do have a problem with people trying to convert other people. And I do have a problem with people getting into relationships and not adapting themselves. If you are going to be in a relationship with somebody that's outside of your culture or your tradition or your religion, then you're choosing to adapt to them. They don't automatically have to adapt to you, and I don't think it's fair to make them want to like adapt to you by manipulating or seducing or basically setting it as a term. I think that if you love someone, you'll encourage them to choose for themselves and won't say like, oh, by the way, my mom, it's important for her if you're going to become part of our culture or religion, that it's important for my parents to marry somebody. And it's like, that's very manipulative because you're kind of saying that, oh, it's not me, I accept you, but I would love it if you made my mom happy and became what they wanted you to be. And it's manipulative. It's like a gentle, subtle way of manipulating somebody into feeling like, well, if they want to please you and if they want to gain your parents' approval and if they want to be like that best person for you, that they should do these things. And the reality of it is, if they were already doing it when they met you, then why should they do it on your influence? Don't go on a show which is not for like Jewish single people and then marry somebody and then make them feel like if they want to please you, they have to integrate into Jewish religion, otherwise their parents are not going to accept you. Like, if you know that your parents want you to marry a Jewish person, then date Jewish people. Don't date anybody and then just expect them to integrate to make your family happy. So it's the same with SK and Raven. I think that although it is up to Raven if she chose that, it obviously didn't make her happy. And when she was with her friends meeting SK, her friends told SK that she's not gonna be like a Nigerian woman. We know what Nigerian men and women, what their sort of dynamic is like, and Raven is a free woman. She's liberal, she is modern, she's not gonna be doing this. And are you gonna be okay with that? And then in the end, she ends up kind of being cornered by his female family members, who he should have expected would be like that, and then being told all these things that are like so drastic and dramatic. And I don't know how she was just kind of there, like she was in shock, but I expected to be some kind of reaction after that, and there was no discussion. When SK was asking Raven what it was like when she went shopping with his mother and his sisters, she didn't talk about it. And these are one of those fishy things that people talk about when they say, okay, there was a lot more that needed to be resolved with SK and Raven, but they never really showed it. And that's why you can imagine that it was all kind of a front with their relationship. Again, I'm not criticizing or judging. I'm criticizing, but not in a just to be negative. I'm not saying that I'm a perfect person, but I'm saying these are things I would have integrity beyond. I would not act in these ways. Of course, like, who knows, I can make mistakes in the future. I make mistakes now, I've made mistakes in the past, but these are things that consciously I'm not okay with. And I did expect Raven to stand up for herself. She seemed like a strong woman, and I was very surprised that she ended up showing herself as being so passive and so submissive. How could she hear these things about putting herself beneath this man in status just because he's a man. And the kind of woman she is, that was like independent, strong, fierce, and like making her own money, doesn't need a man to take care of and all that, and then all of a sudden she's like okay with this and she doesn't even bring it up. I refuse to believe that that is real. Either it was edited out, they didn't show it, or she just didn't bring it up because she was playing a game, as everybody is saying now, that they were just putting on a show for the cameras. They wanted to ride out being on the show as long as possible for money. I haven't really been following the gossip on him cheating, although I wouldn't be surprised. I do believe that potentially they were both in on it for business. In terms of my personal feelings, other than like, what the hell was this thing about her cooking for him and putting him above her, and I was like, it made me sick to my stomach to hear that. If people grow up in that culture, trying to get them out of that mentality is a completely different thing. But I'm completely against them marrying outside of their culture and trying to force people to change from being empowered to being disempowered, from being like free liberated women to being like in a patriarchal system. I'm completely against that, because I'm against those aspects of the culture that suppress women. So and there's not much more I can say about that. But I mean, if the women in those cultures choose to stay in those cultures, you know, there's many reasons why that happens, but it is oppressive of women. Having said that, I also come from a mixed heritage, one side of which is very patriarchal, and that definitely oppresses women. So it's not just that I'm speaking from, but I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because anybody, this is something like objectively we can see is wrong. Suppressing women, telling women that they need to bow down and make the man more important because he is a man. So this was like ridiculous to me, to be like in America on an American show. I understand that people online take a lot and just run with it. But when it comes to Matt and Colleen, I don't personally, I could be wrong, but I don't personally feel or sense domestic violence vibes. When I said that there's some traits from some people on the show that I relate to, I'm talking about Matt. So I definitely relate to having trust issues, wanting to run away or escape when you feel like the person is kind of flaky or kind of indirect. Colleen is a very indirect person. He had to keep asking her, where are you at, you know, with your feelings, how do you feel about me and stuff, and he was really leading the relationship. But that's also because Colleen was following. She was looking, she wasn't really sure of herself, she didn't know what she wanted. She, as some people have said, she really seemed like she would have said yes to anybody. Was rejected by 2 people, and really I don't really take rejection personally in this kind of sense. I don't see why it would be personal, because she really like took a lot out of Cole, saying that maybe they're not right for each other, and basically said that he said she was shallow and he did not. So he said that he wants deep conversations, he wants a deep relationship, and she said she doesn't find that attractive. That's not usually what she's interested in. So if you say that to somebody who says that what they're looking for, and you say, I don't find that attractive, what do you expect them to say? Of course he was gonna take that as a, okay, you're not interested in the same thing, you don't have the same values. Like, I would take it personally if I said that I'm into deep conversations, I want, you know, a relationship with somebody who wants to go deep into emotions, and somebody says they're not attracted to that, I'm gonna feel like, well, you're not attracted to me, because that's what I am, that's who I am. So I'm obviously gonna be like, I would think that you don't want to be with me either. So I don't know why she went out of that and then was like, he basically said I'm shallow, but he did not. You said that you were not interested in going into that kind of deep dynamic. So I don't know what she expected and why she blamed him. Even at the reunion, she poked at it, because in every reunion it seems like they have a scapegoat, and Cole became the scapegoat. And I'm so glad. That's number one thing I should have said in this video. I'm so glad that I went online and saw that everybody was feeling what I was feeling, that Zainab was crazy, because she is. And I say that as somebody who is diagnosed with emotional instability, that's me. and I recognize a lot of her behaviors as borderline behaviors, borderline personality disorder type behaviors. I've seen therapists saying that she displays symptoms of anxious avoidance, which is true, but it's just really more of a symptom. I personally, having dated women with emotional instability of different ranges on the spectrum, and being diagnosed with emotional instability myself, I can recognize some of her behaviors as narcissistic, as borderline personality disorder, as extremely emotionally shut down, and dangerous. And I saw that she broke Cole, and I saw that, like everybody said, Cole said some immature things. Maybe he's a little bit silly, maybe he's a little bit like unaware of himself, but he was pure in heart. He was just naive. He thought he could be honest with her. He thought he could be kind of direct and blunt. She had some deep insecurities. That didn't work out, but then she kind of went into like a revenge mode, and it was almost as if she was like conniving. It was almost as if she was vindictive. It's like she held it all in, and then she was like throwing everybody off, saying that she thanks God for this man, and then she gets on the altar and her behavior was like a retaliation. It was full of a revenge mode vibes. It was like, I'm having a moment where I'm like standing up for female empowerment, and like I'm standing up for myself on behalf of all women, and I'm having kind of like a Me Too moment. And I'm so glad that it didn't work out for her that way, because it was truly cold. He was heartbroken. A therapist that I watch, Stefania, she said it like kind of hit the nail on the head when she said Zainab seemed like she felt like she was having a moment like Deepti with Sheikh, where she did stand up for herself. She did say, well, I deserve better, essentially, and people did support her. Now, I didn't personally, that's also a different issue from previous season. I do think that she was, at the end of the day, just pissed off that Sheikh wasn't attracted to her. I didn't see a lot of, other than him saying, oh, when I'm with her, I feel like I'm with my auntie. I'm just not sexually attracted to her. I don't know, again, why Sheikh was such a scapegoat. They were saying that he said worse things off camera and all that. I don't know what's going on with that. I can't speak on it, but from what I saw on camera, he was just being honest about his feelings. Maybe he's unfiltered, maybe he shouldn't have said that stuff, but it's not really insulting. So he was fighting with his feelings because he liked her as a person, but he couldn't force himself to feel a sexual attraction, and I don't blame him for that. I don't know why everybody's being so unrealistic about that situation, and he was the scapegoat. Like, there's a lot of pressure. It happens very fast. I think that Cole talking to Colleen was a little bit instinctively flirtatious and silly. It was definitely like a breaking of boundaries, and he shouldn't have done it. It was a mistake. He shouldn't have defended it or tried to justify it. He should have said sorry. He should have realized it was wrong right away. And he should realize that if somebody did it to him, he wouldn't like it. But I do think that it was him trying to get closure, trying to just talk to Colleen about, okay, how he feels now that he's seen her, that he doesn't necessarily feel regret, but he's like, oh, it was a hard decision. But at the end of the day, he had made his choice. He was happy with who he's with. I mean, I think it was different, and this is the thing. This is the comparison. I think what Colleen definitely was like is one of those girls that I think just, between the two of them, I prefer Raven's reaction to Bartise. I prefer a woman who knows what she wants and is gonna say it up front and has integrity. It's like, so why are you talking to me now? You said no to me in the pods. I'm with somebody. Why are you now trying to kind of flirt or see what, you can talk to me or whatever, but why are you being flirtatious? Like, I'm not gonna disrespect my person by engaging in this. Colleen is somebody who's a little more like, I think, people-pleasing, and she felt like she had to react to Cole in a way that is charming, and maybe that is gonna give him a little bit of validation because he gave that to her. She strikes me as more of like what usually we would see in like I'm gonna give astrology hints now, but like I'm hinting towards like a Libra like energy, a Venetian energy, somebody that who appears flirtatious because they just are a little bit people pleasing, and they don't want to make somebody dislike them, so they might be a little bit extra charming and friendly, but it doesn't mean that she feels anything. Personally, I'm not attracted to that kind of woman. I would much prefer a woman who does not give a fuck. Like Raven, when Bartise was trying to talk to her in a similar fashion, just to see, but although there was a different energy, but I just like how Raven was so direct, like, no, you don't do it for me. And even if she was feeling a little bit of attraction to him, even if she was thinking, well, you might make a good fuck or whatever, she was not gonna say it because she doesn't want to come across as this person who is like giddy and bimbo-ish and doesn't know what she wants and can't give a direct message. So I prefer that reaction. I also would be pissed off if, like, I would not be dating a girl like Colleen who is kind of gonna be a little bit flirtatious back, because that does upset me. Like, Matt is a direct person. He's a person of integrity. He's gonna say what he feels like is the right thing, and he's not gonna just do what Cole wanted in that situation so he can gain a little. He was obviously seeking validation, and Colleen wanted to give it to him. She did. I understand that she didn't feel like she could kind of just blow him off, and she did say later to Matt, like, I just didn't know what to say in that situation. But it's like her instinct is to please that person, and Cole was seeking validation. She felt like she needed to give him that, and later she was like, oh, this pissed off Matt now, and now I want to please Matt. And like and that was also seen as like an issue. Like I said, though, it was an issue that she was afraid to speak her mind, that she was afraid to put her foot down, that she was afraid to say, well, this is what I did. Or and I think that if she was that person, like, if she could stand up to Matt and say, look, Matt, I've done nothing wrong, then she would not be the kind of person who would be this extra flirtatious, who would have any sort of guilt because she knows that she said something that was a little bit out of line, that she behaved a little bit flirtatious, and she knew she couldn't justify that. She knew that the way she had to tell Matt what happened in that interaction with her and Cole, she had to filter it a little bit. So she has to filter, like, to everybody, because she can't 100% be direct and honest. She can't control that. She needs to tell people what they need to hear in order to like her. That's what I get from her. So, and I also think that, like, she could easily be swayed for that reason, because she is a people pleaser. I feel she could easily have been swayed. She is the kind of girl that I do think is wrong for Matt. I do think that she could be caught up in a moment, that she could cheat, because I think she's not able to talk directly about her feelings. Personally, I think that at the altar she wanted to say no. And that's what I should have led with when it comes to Matt and Colleen. I think that at the altar she wanted to say no. She was so tense, cringy tense. She was so uncomfortable, and I honestly felt like she was afraid leading up to it to talk to Matt and say, hey, I know we're a little bit on the fence, but I don't think we should do this. I think she doesn't have the courage, and she was trying to build it up and trying to build it up. Honestly, like I say, I think she can be swayed. I think that she was just following Matt, and she was just like going with it because she's so afraid to be the one who to cause this awkward situation, to be the one who shuts it down. I think the way she was like, Maddie, I do. It was not. It was not certain. She, she wanted to say, Maddie, I love you, but I don't think we should get married. That's what I feel, and I haven't heard anybody else say that. But I'm a very intuitive person, and if I'm the only person that feels that, it's fine. But honestly, when she was like, Maddie, it was like, why would you say I do like that? Why would you be so uncomfortable if you're like, you want to marry this man, you feel safe, you feel confident? When she was like hesitating and kept saying Maddie like this, and this affectionate like Maddie, it's like she's trying to soften the blow to say something that might potentially upset him, and I just think she just couldn't do it. Like, she was reading his reaction, and I think that she's terrified to anger him, having seen that he is raging. He has so much anger, and I think it freaks her out as somebody who doesn't show her anger, as somebody who doesn't show this kind of direct energy where she can say, like, fuck you, I don't care. So I think that she she wanted to say no at the altar, and she really was trying to like work up the courage. And I think that she was so scared to turn him down because she was afraid of dealing with how upset and pissed off he was going to be, and that she would lose him completely. And she just, her people pleasing nature, I just feel like she said yes to please him because she was looking at him, she was reading like, can I do it, can I do it, can I say no? And the way he was looking at her was probably was like, he's so afraid, because he's so afraid of being embarrassed, being played, being humiliated, being rejected. And it's like, you know, I trust you to not let me down right now. And I think that he controls her emotionally because she's somebody, I think, who is easily manipulated, and because of her people pleasing, and because she wants so badly to be what somebody else wants. So she said to Cole that she's not attracted into like, she's not attracted to like somebody who wants depth, or she doesn't want like a deep relationship. She wants things to be like lighthearted. And then when he said, well, maybe we're not compatible, she took it so to heart that he didn't like her the way she was, like as if he was gonna change himself and say, okay, I'm okay with that, whatever you want, like. And like, so I think that because she takes rejection so personally, not being liked, not being approved, that's also part of the reason she finds it so hard to do that to someone else and make them feel like rejected or unapproved, you know. I think that it does work two ways. She's very people pleasing, and when somebody else is willing to say no, or is willing to say directly, well, maybe this is not right, she's like, oh, you know, how could somebody make me feel that way? I honestly think that, yeah, she said yes on the altar in the whim of the moment, and then afterwards was probably like, oh fuck, I'm now stuck with him. And just doesn't have the courage and the integrity and the directness to break it off. And she's like, now I've said yes, now how am I gonna tell him I didn't really want to say yes? I think like she's constantly afraid, like, to tell him before and then tell him at the altar. There's always like, oh my god, he's gonna be so pissed off, oh my god, now I've said yes, I can't take it back, he's gonna be so pissed off. And I honestly personally think that she's just going with the flow until she finds like a moment where it's okay for her to break it to him, that she doesn't feel, you know, they're together. I mean, they're not living together, so she's not like going out of her way to move her practical circumstance and everything. I mean, I think that's for a reason, and I think that it's for a good reason. I think that she's probably looking for a moment where she can break it to him, you know, like something to happen that maybe is just gonna, like, maybe he's gonna make the decision, but without her having to deal with any sort of anger. So I don't personally think that there's like violence in the relationship. As I said, I could be wrong. A lot of people were like, I get DV vibes. Yeah, I do understand that when somebody has anger management issues and maybe control issues, you can go into down that path as like the beginning stages of something that could be domestic violence, like particularly for men. Women, it's like I've seen less of it, but when it comes to men and domestic violence, I would say that from my observations and my experience of like analyzing those behaviors and those types of men, he doesn't give me those vibes. He doesn't give me these like super macho, I need to prove myself vibes, that you're not gonna talk back to me, you're not gonna talk down to me or whatever. Like, that I will use my physical force, my male strength, like I will use anything to dominate the situation, to show you who's boss. He doesn't give me those vibes. He gives me the vibes of somebody who's very sensitive and who's distrusting and scared, but he has anger issues because of his pain, what he's been through, and he definitely has a control and attachment thing where he's like clinging because he doesn't want to lose her. He's attached to her emotionally, and he's controlling for that reason. I don't think he's like somebody who's going to be controlling for the sake of being controlling or to feel like a man. I don't think he is going to control how she dresses or what she eats or how she talks. I think that he's afraid to lose her, so it's really more of a trust issue just when it comes to her loyalty, because he doesn't want to be heartbroken, he doesn't want to feel deceived, he doesn't want to feel embarrassed, but I don't think that he would physically be violent. Personally, that's how I feel. We can only speculate because there's no evidence of domestic abuse, and there's no evidence that there is no domestic abuse. But I do, one thing that I haven't seen anybody mention that really like bothered me was his body language towards her. Whenever they're sitting next to each other, he was very like leaning into her and leaning over her kind of thing, and especially when he met her parents, I found it super weird, his body language. He was literally sitting like leaning into her with his arm across her body, almost as if he's like saying to her parents, you know, like, you're not gonna take me away from, you know, you're not gonna take her away from me. Like when he met her parents, I think he had this fear, you know, they might not approve of me, and they might tell her that she shouldn't be with me, and that was like why his body language was like this, sitting with his arm across her body, and she's sitting there. I found that super weird. Like, it just is like his body language is saying, she's mine, you're not gonna take her away from me, you know, and at the same time trying to win their approval through his pride of obviously not wanting to sell himself to the point that he's like chasing ass, but he desperately wants, I don't necessarily think he wants their approval, but I think his body language was saying to me more like, whether you approve or not, you're not going to take her away from me, so she's mine now, kind of thing. Like, very, very protective in a possessive way, not in a healthy, protective way, in a possessive way. And I think that she feels that energy also at the reunion. Again, he was sitting like leaning into her. Everybody else is kind of chilled, sitting back in their own energy. Brennon and Alexa, you know, like, Brennon is very chilled because they feel confident, like, Alexa's not going to go anywhere. Matt was just constantly sitting with his body like leaning towards her, almost as if like the second she tries to get away, he's just gonna like grab her and pull her back. Like, he's so afraid of giving her too much space because she'll just drift away or something. So this signals very unhealthy, clingy attachment, like fear of loss and fear of loss of control, to me, that does signify that there's issues why the relationship is unhealthy, is going to be toxic. I did also say that I recognize some of my behaviors in Matt, and that's another thing, that I've never been physically violent, thankfully, because I know that when people are domestically violent, it is also like a disease. It's like something they can't control within themselves. It's like alcoholism or something. I think, you know, they need therapy in order to be able to like have impulse control and be able to control that it doesn't come out physically. I think that with the amount of anger I've experienced in my life, I'm very lucky that I have that kind of control, because I could easily have been one of those people who, like, if I lose control, like, causes disaster in my surroundings. And it's not always, you know, like, domestic. I think when people are more domestically violent, it's actually because they're more cowardly. And people can have anger issues and just, like, fight a lot, but out there with, like, people of their own size, you know. I don't always think that that necessarily will transfer, and they're like, inside the household. I think there are different, like, things in the mind, different barriers where someone can abuse someone outside their household but wouldn't abuse someone they care about. And then there's other people that I think are too cowardly to even stand up for themselves when it comes to like a stranger out there in public, but then when they come home, they will be domestically violent to their children, who are obviously helpless to fight back, or to their wife, who is helpless to fight back. My father's father was very domestically violent towards mainly the mother, not so much to the children as well, but more towards the mother. And then my father was very aggressive with us, and he would particularly target me, but would be physically violent sometimes, but not to an extreme, nothing like his father. But when it came to my mother, he mostly left her alone. It's almost so it's like he knew that she was a strong woman, that he just, she wouldn't tolerate it maybe, but that like I had no choice kind of thing. So he would focus a lot of his energy and aggression on me, and on my mother. Sometimes he would like argue and yell, but it was like once every 10 years or something. So I think that people can focus this energy, and the point of that is that people have different kind of control mechanisms, and you can usually recognize there's a particular kind of energy with them when it comes to a man who would beat his wife. And there are people who have anger issues. There are men who have anger issues where they would fight a lot, like in bars with other guys, but wouldn't necessarily touch their own loved one. And there are guys who would do both. You can still see the kind of vibe, the same vibe of somebody who is like afraid to be challenged and is willing to use physical aggression, is afraid. Whenever something is out of their control, they try to gain control through physical violence. I do not see any of these examples, this vibe from Matt. Now, again, I could be completely wrong. I also think that Colleen, with everything I've said about her being like unsure of herself, having these like people-pleasing qualities, being insecure, uncertain, or whatever, when it comes to, she might be like that with words and expressing herself. At the same time, I get that she's a smart woman. She was not afraid to tell him in the aquarium when they were having dinner, when he dragged it out of her, you know, where are you with us? Like, she didn't want to bring it up, but she was on the spot. She had to answer, and she answered honestly. In that moment, she said, well, if I was asked now, I would say no because of this. She did bring it up. She has a degree of integrity where she was like, she could say, I'm not sure about us now. I would say no if I was asked right now because, you know, there's this like instability with you threatening to leave every time there's an issue. And the fact that she said that made me think that she is capable of speaking up. Now, when we're talking about the reunion, she looked incredibly nervous and tense. Again, that's why a lot of people, including my partner, were like, I'm worried about domestic violence. But I didn't get those vibes. I felt like because of his reactions being so extreme, they've affected her in a slightly traumatic way. I think that she's shocked by that extremity and the intensity, and I think that she's, as somebody who doesn't really show that much anger and stuff herself, I don't think she's comfortable with this emotion of anger, and I think that she is terrified of triggering him because she does care about him, she does love him, and she does feel affection for him. And I think that she feels terrible when he goes into this state of rage and like breaks down and wants to escape. And I think that she doesn't want to have to deal with the consequence of his anger and have to feel that energy that feels so bad towards her, like this darkness. And I think that that's what makes her nervous. And I think that being at the reunion is a trigger because Cole's there, these other people are there, and I think that she's afraid because they're on camera. I think that he's probably, because of his clinging and his control and his fear, I think that he's maybe hypercritical of her behind closed. That's the vibe I do get, that he is critical and that like watching all of her actions. And I think that she is very aware, self-conscious now. I think she's on eggshells because she's like, when we go home, he's gonna tell me, well, you looked at this person this way, or you said this, why did you say this? It makes me look bad, you know. And I think that she's afraid to say anything or do anything that could trigger him, that later she has to deal with this instead of having nice, good vibes, you know, at home, sleeping together, being comfortable, and having to deal with his anger. And I think she doesn't want to deal with that. And I think she doesn't know what to say when he gets angry. She doesn't know how to comfort him. She doesn't know how to make him fall back and talk to him like in a straight manner and say like, Matt, you need to chill. This is your problem. I'm not doing anything wrong. I think she doesn't know how to say this and stand up for herself. So I think that she's just lacking a lot of confidence. Like, I think she has a personality clash with him in this way, that he's so direct and wants control, and she's so like doesn't want to be put on the spot, and she doesn't want to have to like answer direct questions and say anything that could make somebody feel bad or trigger some conflict avoidant. I think she's conflict avoidant, and she's terrified of conflict. And I think that's why she doesn't show anger. That's why she doesn't stand up for herself. That's why she never says things directly. And that's what I think the issue is, that she's very nervous. You know, the two couples that actually bothered me the most that I've not talked about as much are Cole and Zainab. I've briefly touched upon it. I just really want to make it clear that I do think that Zainab is extremely toxic. Her behavior, I think that she needs to be alone, and she needs to figure out how she can be more patient, be more giving in a relationship, rather than seeking somebody to fill this hole that is there because of her parents having died. I think she needs to work on this and be content with herself and be in a relationship where she has compassion and patience and space that she can allow them to be flawed and allow them to make mistakes and allow them to be themselves without trying to make them this perfect person, knight in shining armor, who's gonna swoop in and bring their family with them to like fill this gap in her life, and while she tries to push them away as much as possible, and while she's like unstable with her affection towards them. I think that this is not appropriate. I think that Cole dodged a bullet, and I truly, truly empathized and felt very, very sorry for him and what he went through. I think that he went into a spell of depression. Also, the therapist that I watched, Steph Anya, on the subject said that it was clear that he fell into like a spell of depression, period of depression because of what he went through. And having dated emotionally unstable women myself with similar personality traits to Zainab in the past, I know that they can rip you apart in a very short period of time and definitely put you into like suicidal depression, especially if you're vulnerable already. And I think that Cole is not particularly like vulnerable in the sense that he has mental health issues or something before that, but he's vulnerable in the sense that he's a very naive guy. He was willing to like really compromise a lot, and he really wanted to make it work. He did want to be loved and to love somebody, and he truly cared about her. I think he truly wanted to help her when she had all these issues, and she completely pushed him away and tore him down. And it's very easy when you're falling kind of in love with somebody and then they're so cold to you for you to just be shocked and confused. That is narcissistic abuse. I think that with that one, I know that people throw around the word narcissistic and narcissist online, but honestly, I think in this case, it was very, very justified. She is a narcissist. She only thinks of herself. She's manipulative. She's vindictive is the number one word. I didn't hear anybody else using, but I found her actions on the altar vindictive. She was acting from pure resentment. It was a horrible way to treat him, and he didn't deserve that. It was, we all saw the clip with the cuties, and I was so glad they showed it, and I think everybody was glad they showed it because we were all waiting at the end of that episode, that the reunion, like, I really want to see this clip. And I love that Cole said, please show it, because he was so certain of himself, like there was nothing going on other than like what was going on in her head. If it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be certain because she was so manipulative. I hope that the other people on the show, especially the women, saw how wrong they were for judging Cole and being manipulated by Zainab in the name of like sisterhood, and just automatically taking her side without hearing both sides of the story. And assuming that the guy is wrong, again with this like #MeToo situation where you just assume that because a girl calls out a guy for abuse that it must be true, and it's not. And a lot of good guys can get destroyed by this. And also it takes away from women who genuinely have been abused by men and call out Me Too, and it's almost like other women are coming and crying wolf. Like a guy says something they don't like and they call it out as Me Too and tag this guy, and it's like it's literally nothing. So taking advantage of this, taking advantage of the fact that people are trying to empower women and stand up for women in domestic violence situations, and then other women come in and just like take advantage of the situation and manipulate people to think that they are a victim, and actually it could be them that is the one who is more abusive than the man. And I think that Zainab deserves a lot of accountability. And from what I saw and heard on her Instagram, she was, I don't follow her, but I heard that she was like trying still to make herself a martyr and saying to people, I'm sorry if I don't feel the same way as you, if my insecurities aren't the same as yours, you don't understand what I'm going through, blah 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 blah. But we all saw the evidence. For me, before I saw the clip, I knew, because I've been in situations, like I said, I've dated women like Zainab, and what I saw was that she was talking about how she had been experiencing these abusive behaviors from him and talking about it emotionlessly with a straight face, whereas Cole was like shocked and confused and like, how are you saying this? It's insane that you're like making up this story. Like he was like confused, bewildered. He was like, what is going on? And I recognize that feeling. I recognize that reaction where I'm like, are you serious right now? Are you making this, like, are you just literally gonna make stuff up in my face? And he was saying like she's making it up because he had no memory of it, and she's just like, Cole, you did this. And if truly it happened and he was truly denying it, she would be shocked and confused at his reaction, and she wasn't. She was almost as if like she expected him to deny it because she knew she was making it up, or she knew that she was like overreacting, she knew that she was manipulating, she knew that she was exaggerating. She was just like, Cole, you said this to me. He told me that he called a woman, he got a woman's number, blah blah blah, and there was no evidence to, and like all the guys were like not really wanting to stand up for Cole because they don't want to be in the hot seat of like defending an abuser, and at the same time they couldn't deny that like they had no evidence of this. They didn't go with him anywhere after. They were at this like rodeo or whatever. They were like, well, I went home, I got drunk, we were drunk, so we got in a taxi, we went home, we don't know anything else. So it was like there was no evidence that they went anywhere. So I did read a comment that kind of made sense. Somebody said that after watching the Cuties clip, they wouldn't be surprised if basically Zainab said something at like when he came home, if she asked him a question to provoke an answer out of him, and said something like, so did you talk to any other girls, or, and then he might have reacted as a joke and said, yeah, like even I talked to another girl, I even got her number, like as a joke, and then she might have taken that seriously and said like he said this, whether it really happened or not, like he said it to upset me or whatever, which is not the case. It might have been such a like sarcastic response that he doesn't even remember saying it because he was drunk, but it was obviously not real. Or like, she completely made it up. It seems a little bit far-fetched. She seems like somebody who maybe just exaggerates things and takes them out of completely like out of reality, is disillusioned, but I wouldn't say she completely made it up. That situation would make a lot more sense to me. Like if he came home, she was like, oh, so did you flirt with any other girls? Were there any pretty girls? And he was like, oh yeah, I talked to another girl, I even got her number, just as a silly joke, just to be like don't be ridiculous, I wouldn't do that kind of thing. And then that's how she took it, and she was like, probably went silent, there was no further discussion, he was drunk, he didn't think any more of it, he didn't even remember that he said that. And then she like came on the show and was like, Cole, you said that you talked to another girl, you got her number, blah blah blah, you can deny it all you want, like emotionless and cold. And honestly, if it was true, I believe that she would be brought to tears. She would be crying. She would be hurt. She would be shocked. She would be confused. She would be like, I can't believe you did all these things to me, you know, instead of like, I forgave you, Cole, straight after I said all that stuff at the altar, which was made very much so clear to me by other people. Again, reading the comments have been very insightful. People saying that, you know, she was just acting like a martyr because she said all this stuff as if she was retaliating, as if she was getting revenge at the altar, and then she's saying that she forgave him immediately after. This is not something that realistically happens. If she had her self-esteem destroyed, she wouldn't have forgiven him so immediately, especially when she had so much resentment to completely put him down and humiliate him at the altar like that, and then forgive him directly after. Forgiveness doesn't happen that fast. It's how hurt you must have been to have your self-esteem destroyed. You loved him, he hurt you, he abused you, and then you forgave him immediately after, but yet you're still sitting here pointing fingers at him, trying to make him look like a villain, and that's not what you would do if you had compassion, if you had forgiven him. So it's like she's playing the victim, and then she's playing the martyr, like, I'm above this, I've forgiven you, and it's like she wants people to think like, oh, you're so wise, you're so strong, you know, and it's like not true. She did not look like the victim of abuse. Victims of abuse, to be 100% honest with you, is somebody, like I said, who's dealt with emotionally unstable women, narcissistic women. I've experienced abuse. I experienced domestic abuse, like I said, from my father and my mother, emotional abuse. When you've been abused by somebody, you're generally afraid to stand up to them. You're traumatized. Even if this person pretended to love you, you're still scared of them because you know what place they can manipulate you with love, hugs, smiles, and words, and you still end up feeling so much pain, so bad about yourself, that you're afraid to go near this person. You're afraid to be in the same room with this person. You're definitely not going to be talking directly to them, making eye contact, pointing fingers, saying you did this, you did this, you did this. You're definitely not going to embarrass them in front of a room full of people. If they had destroyed your self-esteem, you would be too self-conscious to do that in front of them. You would be so afraid of what they think of you. You would be so broken that if you even had the courage to be in the same room as them, you would not be sitting there making a show of it, pointing fingers, expressionless face, talking cold, not with any tears, not with any vulnerability, not even shaking, not your eyes not even like trembling, none of that reaction. Like you would have an emotional response. Your body would have a response. You would want to break eye contact. She's just looking directly at him. She's like an antagonizer. People don't do that when they've had their emotions hurt deeply abusively by somebody, when they've had their self-esteem broken by somebody, when they've had their confidence broken by somebody, because they know that that person has the power to do it again. They are in a position of vulnerability with that person. Maybe they really care what they think. Maybe they love them a lot. Maybe they care deeply, passionately, but they've been somehow emotionally affected so much by this person that this person's had power like that over them. They've given that power to them. It's not something that you can just switch. It's not something that really over any amount of time. Like, I was in an abusive relationship, with emotionally abusive relationship with somebody 10 years ago, and I still am terrified to bump into them on like public transport or something, because I live in London City. I mean, you always bump into people like on the London Underground from like 15 years ago, and it's like I still have like these like fears of bumping into them. And it's not, they were never like physically violent, it's all like in the mind. But when somebody hurts you so much emotionally and they can somehow pull you back in and do it again and pull you back in and do it again, you become afraid of what kind of power they like have over you emotionally and mentally, psychically, that they just can affect you, take you to this place where you're shattered as a human being. And honestly, from what I saw in evidence right there at the reunion, Cole was the victim in that situation. He was broken. He wasn't like, after the altar, he was confused. He was like broken. He didn't know what to think. He didn't know how this happened. You know, he like was brave to be there and still talk with compassion. And it really pissed me off when Brennon jumped in to call him disrespectful because he was like, oh, that's crazy. Or when Cole, as the only person in that room, tried to hold Zainab accountable for something that she did with all the fingers she was pointing, and then Brennan was like, oh, good comeback, you did it first, like he's a school kid or something. But it's like Brennan's also being like a school kid, jumping in to something he doesn't even have any evidence of, that he doesn't even know who's on what side of this situation, and just using a scapegoat to trying to impress Alexa. Like, I'm such a good guy, I'm not like Cole, like I'm like standing up for the women's side, trying to be this guy. And it was like so fake, so kiss-assy, so like, what the hell is your problem, Brennan? Why are you trying so hard to suck up to Alexa? It's like obvious that Alexa runs this relationship. You're compromising everything for her. I don't see that she's compromised anything for you, and now you're like trying so desperately to impress her that you're actually hurting somebody else, when really, I saw like comments of people saying like, it's a shame none of the guys were standing up for Cole because all the women were standing up for Zainab, and she was in the wrong in the end. And I know that there's, like I said, there's this whole thing about like women and abuse, and everybody wants to like support women, but this doesn't mean that abuse never happens the other way around. And this doesn't mean that, you know, guys should be afraid to stand up for other guys experiencing abuse from a woman, because it does happen, and it's not something that should go ignored. And it is something that goes ignored because it's more rare that it happens. It doesn't mean that when it happens, it's not just as damaging. It doesn't mean that men don't need like a Me Too movement. Like, they don't need support for domestic violence. It's almost like seen as embarrassing for a guy to even admit it. And at the end of the day, a good guy who is loving and caring could just as easily be abused by a manipulative woman. Because as I say, abuse is not all about physical. It's not all about a man being physically strong. This is what I think we're starting to understand, especially with narcissistic abuse. Like, somebody can destroy your mind much more, do much more damage with emotional and psychological abuse than they can with just physically hitting you. Even with my parents, is people, charities, organizations, companies that like help with abuse not really taking it seriously. People, professionals not really taking it seriously. Institutions, police not really taking it seriously. When you say I'm being abused and they're like, well, are they physically hitting you? And you're like, no. And they're like, well, basically you're keeping yourself in that situation. They don't understand that you can't just leave. They don't understand you don't have other options. They don't understand that they're like, you're being manipulated. They don't understand. They think you make this decision like it's up to you. And I think that that's something the world is starting to understand a little better. But as we saw evidence of on this show, it's not good enough, because nobody saw what was happening between Zainab and Cole. I mean, Cole was talking about it, that she's hypercritical, and that's a red flag. And the guys were just like saying, oh, you know, at the end of the day, you know, you love her, you want to be with her, just put up with it, you know. She's who you chose, you know, she's sexy, she's good looking, you want to get that ass, so, you know, just put up with it, right? It's worth it. Like, that's what they were basically saying to him when he was saying, you know, is it meant to be like this? Like, he was questioning, like, she's very critical of me, blah, 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 blah. Obviously, he knew that it doesn't make him feel, it's not what, the way he wants to feel. It's not, it doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel right, it's not what he wants to do with the rest of his life. Now, Bartise and Nancy, I have not brought up, and there is a lot to say. When it comes to Bartise, he was a little boy. I'm glad that somebody else mentioned that he was extremely disillusioned when it came to his view of himself, his like vanity, how he repeatedly kept saying that he was like this guy who in a bar would draw attention, and like I can't believe that he was actually like saying these things out loud, because it's like just not something that you say out loud. It gave me very, very Leo-like vibes for the astrology fans. Like somebody who has so much Leo in their chart that they don't even understand that it's like not okay to say these things out loud, that they just think it's like automatically acceptable. And that he also thought like it was automatically acceptable for him to tell Nancy, who by the way is super hot, right? I didn't agree with a lot of her behaviors. Like, I thought she was pretty cowardly. I thought she was extremely, like had no integrity and was tolerating a lot from him. And then at the reunion, she kept poking at Bart. Like, I lost respect for her. I respected her at least to a degree. I was like, she's very devoted to the man that she wants to be with. She's very compassionate. She's very wise when it comes to abortion and stuff. But then, at the reunion, she kept poking at Cole, when really the things she wanted to say were like at Bartise, right? But she couldn't say them to him directly. And that, again, I was like, what is her problem? Like, did he just make her feel so unworthy, so shit about herself by talking about how somebody else is more attractive to him, that she just felt like, I mean, that you can see is a true victim of abuse, because he did put her down by talking about how he finds somebody else more attractive. He made it seem like he has options as if she doesn't, and for some reason, I don't know what self-esteem issues she has, because she, I'm sure, has plenty of options, but for some reason she went with this as if like, yeah, he is some, and she was like so nice to him, calling him her king, you know, king size bed for my king, and it's not like he ever said, oh, you're my queen, you know. She really knows how to treat a man, but the only thing that would make it better if she had a little more self-respect, hands down, and also a little more courage to stand up for herself and say, this is not okay, I'm not putting up with this. Like, why she was so committed. She gives me Taurus vibes. So like, whether it's Venus in Taurus, Mars in Taurus, Moon in Taurus, like Taurus rising, she gave me such Taurus vibes. She was like so stable. She put up with things that I can't imagine anybody else putting up with. When he's saying all these disrespectful things to her that like she doesn't need to know, you need to work out this in your head, and you need to tell her that she's the most beautiful person in the world to you. And if you decide that you want to be with someone else, then you just tell her that up front. But you don't need to like figure this stuff out loud to her and make her feel as though she's just an option for you. Like, you can decide at any moment to be with Raven, but you just feel guilty about it. And then he tried. Not like Cole, he wasn't trying to get closure. He was trying to see if Raven felt the same way he did. He was trying repeatedly. When they were in the pool, the way he was talking to Raven was not like, oh, yeah, I thought you were hot, but like, I love Nancy. He was like reaching. He was reaching to see if she would reach back, and I love how she shut him down. He was like such a child. And throughout all of this, then he has the nerve to be jealous and show that jealousy and control when literally in the previous scenes he was sitting on the computer ignoring her. I don't know what happened between them, but he was like to the camera when he was doing the interview, he was like, you know, if I don't feel this physical attraction, if I don't feel like I want to kiss her or I want to do anything, I'm not going to force myself to, right? She was crying, she was walking out, they didn't even say goodbye, so I don't know what was happening in this scene because it was extremely awkward. He was sitting on the computer and they were not talking. She was upset and she was like packing some stuff and she was like walking out to go, I don't know where she was going, and there was like no communication between them. He was like being cold. I think that because he was trying to make himself feel like it's okay if I don't want to be with her, like I don't feel attracted to her, which I think is crazy because she's so attractive, right? She's so fuckable. And he just, like, I understand, like, he's a young guy. He didn't want to feel like he's settling. He felt like he wants to have this power couple, perfect picture image, like, I'm beautiful, Raven's beautiful, I want to be with Raven. Honestly, I think that if he saw Raven without the blonde hair, he would feel differently, because when I saw Raven without the blonde hair, I was like, she looks totally different. She has a pretty face and all that, but it's the blonde hair that really makes her this, like, magazine, pop culture type. And without the blonde hair, she looked totally different. A lot more simple, a lot less, like, kind of glamorous, and I think he's extremely shallow. He was all about looks, and like, he got a girl who's very attractive. Nancy's very attractive. She's got a good, sexy body, beautiful face, and my partner and I were both like, she's so attractive. We both find her attractive, and we both have different tastes, but she was like kind of universally attractive. And so committed. What I found sexy about Nancy was something that I haven't seen a lot on the show. She was so devoted to him, for sure, too devoted. And I mean, she had money. She was like a grown woman. She has property, she has this business, and she was willing for, like, somehow to share it with him, and he was like so into that, right? Even though he was like somehow petty about the fact that she still had this business with her ex. Like, it's so childish. It's so 12-year-old. It's like insecure 12-year-old to have a problem with the person that you're dating still interacting with her ex. I mean, they're not in bed together. They're still doing business together. I mean, mature people don't cut off their exes, and people that are comfortable with themselves, that are confident, that don't have insecurities, are not afraid of whoever they're dating having interaction with their exes. If he was intimidated just by the fact that she's still doing business with her ex. I mean, at the end of the day, if he's threatened that at some point, if they're going to be seeing each other, they might get back together, she might sleep with somebody else. Like, he's so insecure, but yet he thinks it's okay to tell her to her face constantly that he's basically like deciding between her and Raven, and that he basically wants to leave this open. Essentially, he was like, I'm not sure about you, because I also am really thinking that I would look better with Raven, essentially. And Raven was right and wise to say that he never gave me any compliments, actually, when we were in the pods, and now that he's seeing me in person, he's like complimenting. He's like, I want to give you a compliment. He wasn't just trying to give her a compliment. He was 100% reaching and flirting, and it was so gross to look at, because it was like, boy, pick yourself up off the floor. He was so, like, jaw open, mouth on the floor. Oh my god, Raven, I just want you all over me. And literally, like, he was saying nothing about her personality, and it was true. He did not say really any compliments towards her in the pods. I think Bartise is somebody who's all about himself, and he's like a young, immature boy. He even was hinting that it was really like, when he was talking to his sister, I'm pretty sure he was hinting that when he was talking to his friends about Nancy, they were like saying, oh, come on, what are you doing? Like, you can do better, or something, like physically. That's what I got from it. It was cut very short, but I think he was essentially saying that, like, I don't want that puts me off. He was saying all the reasons why he's not sure about Nancy, and some of those reasons that he was talking about, like the abortion and his family, is like so silly. You can tell he's very young and inexperienced, because these kinds of things are the things that are always going to be there in a relationship. Having different values, having different beliefs, having different understanding of life. One thing that really pissed me off about the abortion thing is that Nancy was coming from a place of experience, and they were all coming from a place of like theoretical, and they have no idea. They don't know what it's going to be like taking care of a disabled child for their entire life, the reality of that. So coming from this place where you like don't believe in abortion, and you think every life is valuable, and you're going to give up your entire life and commit everything to a disabled child, when they didn't really listen or consider what she was saying. She works with families who have children with disabilities, and basically takes over the entire life, and it's like constant heartbreak for them. Personally, I think if you're willing to go through that, go through it, but I think that it's cruel to the child. If you know the child's going to be born and have a lifetime of disability, I think that there are cases, you do see documentaries where people are like, oh, they bring joy to my life, and even though they have all these disabilities, they're still very happy, and they're like a gift and stuff, but you only really see clips of their lives. You don't really see everything they go through, and I think that if you think that you can make that work, then great for you, but if you honestly don't want that, then you don't want that. And I think that it should be up to the woman whether she wants to give birth or not, because she's doing it through her body. And I think that it should be up to two parents involved, not families. The two parents involved, unless the families are planning to be involved in raising this child, then it's the mother and the father both. It's not just up to one person. Bartise can't say like that I want this child to be born if they have to raise it together. So I understand that it's not something they agreed on, but these are not the kind of things I think that you can 100% avoid. If it's not going to be this, it's going to be something else. But I think that mature people who've been through relationships and breakups and long-term relationships know that things like this even shouldn't stop you, because you're never going to find a perfect person who believes everything the same and has the same values, and also is like your physically perfect type and is always going to be that way. And like, whilst I don't, like, I also didn't agree at the same time. Like, Nancy's family was very, very, like, involved, excessively controlling, protective, possessive. Like, they shouldn't have been jumping on Bartise as much. I think that the relationship is between two people and not so much between the families. Like, Nancy's brother kind of, like, I think that Nancy's brother, though, even though they have this culture of, like, oh, yeah, we're gonna interrogate him, and I didn't think that was cool, I think he had some good intuition about Bartise. He saw that he was just immature. He saw that he was like a boy, that he was shallow, that he wasn't really like a real man, and in the end, he did say that. But in the beginning, he held back his thoughts. He was like, well, if that's what my brother says, that, it's up to you and Nancy, fine, that's my older brother. But when Bartise turned around to the younger brother and was like, I'm guessing you're on the same page, he was like, well, this look was so like, yeah, man, I don't like you, man, but it's not up to me kind of thing. I wish I could say more, but I'm just gonna hold it back. And then in the end, like, he was a sensitive guy, he was intuitive, he was pissed off, he was passionate. I don't think they can jump on Bartise and say, why did you say no and stuff. I do think it's between them. I think Nancy's an adult and they're very protective of her, but she's not a little girl. They can be there to have her back if she fails, if she chooses the wrong guy, but they can't like interrogate the guy and be like, you better not let her down, or we're gonna come and like slice your head off or something. Because at the end of the day, we all make mistakes in relationships and we have to learn from that, and it is for Nancy to do that. They can't control who she's with or threaten him because she's just gonna go off and find another guy and go through the same BS because it's Nancy's choice. It's up to Nancy when she's gonna mature and when she's gonna learn who she has to go for, who's the right person for her on her own level, because she's obviously got some issues to work through why she went for this guy. Honestly, I think that I was happy when she chose Bartise because he seemed like more real, more genuine than Andrew. But then later on, I was like, Andrew's more of a man. Yeah, he's got like some. He's a typical kind of spiritual person who bypasses like his insecurities and tries to come off with this like excessively charming bravado narcissist. It's almost as if he was like constantly only talking about himself in these stories, trying to impress her, and didn't really ask too much about her, and wasn't trying to be on a ground level, like down to earth. He was very much in his fantasy of being the superhuman, with his spiritual exploration, his transcendent sex, which I don't think there's anything wrong with. Like, I get all that, it's great, but you need to have a balance, and he was not a balanced personality. In fact, I think, like, it's funny that she ended up between these two guys because they're so opposite. Bartise, on the other hand, has, like, no self-awareness, no, like, enlightenment, no consciousness, and he was, like, so immature. And she went for him just because he was more authentic than Andrew. So I was surprised that when she saw Andrew in person at this like bar or whatever, and he was like, "Did you regret saying no to me at all?" And she's like, "No, definitely no." I don't know if she was just kind of like a Raven situation, and just from integrity, she's like, the cameras are on. I'm not gonna be this person who's like flirting with someone when I'm already with somebody else. But like I said, she's too devoted, because Bartise, on the other hand, was flirting with Raven and reaching, whereas Nancy had an opportunity to kind of, especially after Bartise had been ignoring her and not showing her physical affection and saying he doesn't find her attractive, he finds Raven attractive. She had an opportunity to kind of flirt with Andrew and be like, well, maybe I should go with try somebody else. I got a second chance. He's offering me a second chance right now. And she was like, no. She was like, I don't regret saying no to you, and like talking about Bartise and how they've got these issues and stuff. And still, when she's totally on his side, right, and doing exactly what Matt wanted Colleen to do, doing exactly what Raven did, she was like, no, I'm with Bartise. I don't regret saying no to you. Which I don't know why, because she hasn't had any interaction with him since then. So when she was choosing between Bartise and Andrew, she was having a hard time weighing pros and cons. She was like, well, Andrew has this, but like he seemed like it would be interesting, but then she chose Bartise, but now she seemed like so certain. So I think that she was just like saying that because she didn't want to be like seduced by Andrew to behave a certain way she could be called out on. I think she has integrity for sure. But what pissed me off is then Bartise has all of a sudden takes interest. Like, he was ignoring her, saying she wasn't attractive. All of a sudden, somebody else shows interest in her and she becomes more attracted to him. This is such immaturity, such little boy behavior. Oh, somebody else wants her, she became more attracted to me now. Then he's going over and say, do I have something to worry about? And also, even further down the line, he was like a child. He's not even into this girl. He's like, he likes her like a best friend, but he's not into her. He keeps saying he's not into her, but then at the same time he feels the need to have some bravado and point to Andrew, like losing to him. He's like, oh, what did you say to Nancy? You proposed to her, and what did she say to you? Like, no, fuck you, I love Bartise. He's like, haha, you know, like such a child. He's like, yeah, I won, bitch. He's like very, 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 to me, kind of repulsively immature. This was like, what are you trying to prove right now that Nancy chose, like, Nancy chose me, haha. Like, why do you, like, there was no class, there was no class, there was no maturity. Like, at least have some grace that she chose you, great, but now you're treating her badly, so why are you showing off that she chose you over Andrew? Andrew, on the other hand, had no ego about it. He was like, yeah, she said, fuck you, I love Bartise, which she didn't. He almost even said that, he exaggerated that. She chose Bartise, but she wasn't like, fuck you, I love Bartise. He, like, exaggerated that to feed this little boy's ego, because it was so obvious that's what he wanted. Like, he was on such an ego trip about it. Like, you know, I don't even want her, she's an option, I want somebody more like Raven, and he truly thought that he could get Raven away from SK. And that's why he was like genuinely flirting with her like that. And also, when he heard that SK and her had not slept together and SK had said these things to him, he went back and was like talking about it obsessively to Nancy, saying like, oh, I was just sitting there thinking, why is he talking about this to Nancy? Like, you could see on Nancy's face that she was thinking the same thing. She was thinking, why are you obsessing over this? Like, is it because you now are gonna say, like, think that you have a chance with Raven? Like, he was, oh, you know, he's sitting over there and she's sitting on this side of the bed. Like, why is that happening? That's not normal, you know. If they're into each other, they should be, like, sleeping with each other or whatever. And it was just very, his behavior was so childish, but, like, really that moment when he came over to Andrew and Nancy talking, and we all, as viewers, could see that there was, like, nothing going on. She was shutting him down, and there was, like, really, it was quite awkward, actually. He was clearly trying to flirt a little bit, and she was, like, so disinterested, and I have no idea why I think she was just putting that on for the camera, like, she just really wanted to look like she was loyal. But I think, like, deep down, she probably did wonder, like, if it would have gone differently if she tried with Andrew, I think, because I see no reason why she would go from kind of liking Andrew, like, right in the beginning when he was, like, transcendent sex, she was, really excited and really turned on by this. And then later on, they were making fun of Andrew and his transcendent sex, and I mean, like, I mean, this is obviously people that are, like, not into spirituality of any kind, and for them that's like, oh, he's being, like, I don't know, slightly delusional, or like something unrealistic, like putting on a show facade. But actually that's not true. I mean, spiritual people do experience transcendent sex when they explore their sexuality through certain practices, and I get that as a spiritual person with some of it, what Andrew was saying, but I also see that he has a very typical personality where he uses this spirituality to kind of present himself as something that is, like, above it all, and, like, doesn't have these human vulnerabilities, and is, like, detached, and but at the same time it was quite narcissistic in that, like, he just kept telling me stories when I traveled here and when I met this person, and oh my god, and trying to impress and not really trying to get to know the other person. So I do think that Nancy started to pick up on that. But in the beginning, she was kind of really into it, and even when she was making her decision, she was weighing pros and cons. So I don't know why all of a sudden at this bar, especially like with Bartise acting like such a child, she was like so loyal to him. But she was, and then it was extra embarrassing for Bartise to come over and be like, do I have something to worry about? Do I need to being controlling and super jealous? Because why are you controlling and jealous if you're not even sure you want to be with this girl and you were flirting with Raven earlier, or like you're planning to like try to find a like a little gap in SK and Raven's relationship where you can sneak in, um and obviously, like I said, I've heard other people say, like, he was disillusioned with his self-obsession and vanity, where he kept thinking he was like, I'm this person in a bar, we're both this person in a bar that, like, draw attention, and people would come into the bar and think like, oh, I want to talk to you because you look good, and I was just thinking, he is not that person. Even as a gay woman, I can recognize a good-looking man who is, like, has good style, looks attractive. He's not a bad looking guy, but he's pretty average. I think if I went into a bar, I would not notice him. The only thing I liked is when he had this one earring. That's a style I like. It's a little bit hipstery. You know, it's something I would do, is wear one earring. I think it has a kind of flair, but other than that, there was nothing impressive about him. And I think that beyond that, his personality is just despicable. Especially when like I said, that I felt like he was hinting when he was talking to his sister that his friends, which shows a lot about him and the kind of friends he has, and the fact that he has those friends and how immature his friends must be. I don't remember, like, her meeting his friends, but I imagine they're just as immature as him, and that they're basically, like, very shallow. So why he went on Love is Blind if he's so obsessed with, like, the image of what he's gonna look like with the girl that's next to him. Like me and Raven, we both look like this. We both would be this like the best looking person in the bar, so we would be like a power couple together, and we would draw this attention, which is so important for him to draw this attention. I don't remember him like what his friends were like, but from what he was hinting that like he thought he looks better with Raven and his friends would approve or something. It was just so like why go on Love Is Blind if you're then gonna be so obsessed with we're both the person in a bar that people think you look good, I want to talk to you. If that's what you want to do, fine, but don't go on Love Is Blind, try to get to know somebody for their personality and come out of there and be like, oh, I'm more attracted to this person who obviously you had less in common with, who obviously you didn't choose, and then you're like, but I'm torn because I look better with them. It just seems like it defeats the purpose of going on the show, so. But I think that's pretty much it. Bartise really, I think, is my least favorite character, even next to Zainab. Zainab was abusive, but she wasn't that immature. She wasn't like a child. So, and I think of all of them, I was really pissed off with Cole flirting with Colleen, even to the little minimal degree that he did, but the amount he had to like make up for that, and in the end how compassionate he was towards Zainab after she had abused him and confused him, and he ended up being like my favorite person. And why Nancy would have been my favorite person, but the fact that she kept poking at Cole, all the women, I like Raven as well, who I thought was kind of wise and kind of smart, telling Cole, oh, you're not taking any accountability because he didn't call Zainab after the wedding. And it was like, first of all, Zainab took no accountability, and when it came to her criticism and all of that, Cole was even like defending her. He was saying it wasn't that bad when it was that bad, because he was upset about it, trying to talk to her about it in the kitchen. He was talking to other guys about it, saying she's very critical, like that doesn't feel right, and yet he was like, oh, it wasn't that bad, the cameras make it look worse. It was bad enough. What we saw, we knew we don't want to experience that in a relationship, and we don't want to experience that coldness. Like he said, I would expect my wife to just like me a little more. The way she was talking to him in the kitchen when they were cooking this chicken and stuff, that is abusive. She was talking to him like when you're working with a colleague at work and you just can't stand them and you want them out of your space. That's not the way you talk to somebody who you have affection for, who you like, who you love, who you want to marry. And then to sit there and be like, Cole, like the therapist Stefania, she pointed out that she was saying all these things like, Cole, I never thought of you as inferior. I want to marry you. It just upsets me that you're not on the same page. You're not as committed. She's saying all these things, but it's like her tone is not saying that I love you, I like you. Like, why, you know, why can't you have a commitment? Her tone is like cold. Her tone is aggressive, passive aggressive. It is angry. It is resentful. And it is controlling. It's like all these manipulative things, whereas his tone is a lot softer. His tone is somebody who's trying to resolve something. Her tone is not coming from a place of compassion and trying to actually talk through something. When he said that he was upset with the way she was talking to him, I mean, she wasn't like saying the right things in a situation of conflict resolution. When he said that he was upset, he felt inferior, she didn't say, what specific things am I doing that make you feel that way? You know, how maybe I could work on speaking differently to you. Maybe I can work on my compassion, my patience. She wasn't trying to work out. She wasn't trying to take any responsibility. She was just basically blaming him for feeling the way he felt, saying that, you know, that wasn't her intention, that's not how she meant it, so basically it's his fault. Like Stefania, she pointed out, she basically was telling him how she was making him feel, you know, like how he should feel based on what is her intention, supposedly, and how, you know, how he should feel more committed, even though they have this like dysfunctional dynamic. Like he should be okay with it, essentially, because, you know, this is what she means, because she's committed, he should be committed. She wasn't taking any accountability at all. And then Raven jumping in saying you're not taking accountability. Like, how delusional were all these women at this reunion? Because the way she treated him at the altar made it very clear she didn't want him to it wasn't exactly an invitation to continue the relationship, or why would he chase her after that? She completely destroyed him on that altar. It would make no sense. I don't think any of us normal sane people who got treated like that would then call this person afterwards. He was saying that he was telling his friends afterwards, that's not her, you know, that was like, that's not how she usually is, like, she's definitely gonna text me. And I guess he expected her to text and say, Cole, I'm sorry that I reacted so badly, and I'm sorry that, you know, like, whatever, I humiliated you, blah, 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 I was coming from anger or whatever, like, I do want to keep seeing you or something. I would definitely expect, I would expect her to contact him after that, not the other way around. I don't know why anybody expected it. I don't know why he has to take accountability for not contacting her after this wedding. I mean, like, there was no invitation, there was nothing to say that they would continue this contact. The way she treated him was so cold that it was like cut off. It was like it was gonna be done, you know? There was nothing to hold on to. And so for Raven to say that, while Zainab took no responsibility, no accountability, and it was like everything that Zainab did was either she had like compassion and sympathy for that, or she was like, oh yeah, I did it because of this or that. Maybe I could have been more patient, I could have been more compassionate, but it was like nobody was saying how she destroyed his self-esteem by being so naggy and critical and cold with him. So it was really like a one-sided situation. I do not agree with like Nazi feminism where women now abuse men. So this is what I felt like was happening in that situation, and that was really terrible. And so I lost respect for Raven. Any respect I had remaining for any of the good moments she had, I lost respect for in that situation. And Nancy, up until that point, I had respect for her. I had respect for the fact that she also would tell her family to like go and give them space for her to talk to Bartise, that the relationship was between them, and like didn't let them interfere with their protectiveness, and wanted to deal with it herself as a grown-up, as a woman who is empowered, who can make her own decision. And her brother was like, he dragged us here to say no, and she was like, no, we dragged you here, you know, like she was taking responsibility. But again, at the reunion, I lost all respect for her when she kept poking at Cole, when really she wanted to say these things to Bartise, and she had an opportunity to say to his face how she felt, and she didn't. I also think that like rejection or abandonment for her is a big deal, which is very Taurian like energy if she has Taurus somewhere in her chart, because she was so willing and patient. But I don't see why it was just for the sake of marriage. Like, if she was so into him that she was willing to put up with all the shit that she put up with, how come just him saying no at the altar meant the relationship had to end? Why didn't she continue to date him and see where it went? I think that that was kind of silly, because she didn't have any problem with the way he was treating her, enough so to speak up about it and say, this is a problem for me, maybe I'm gonna say no, maybe I'm uncertain. She was like, even though he was behaving all these ways, she was like, I'm still sure about you, I'm certain I want to marry you. And just him saying no, even if he was willing to continue dating, it was enough for her to cut the relationship off completely. Why was it so important that she had this marriage commitment? I mean, she was willing to talk to him afterwards. It wasn't like she felt so humiliated that she was like, I'm not talking to you anymore. She was willing to talk to him. He said all the reasons afterwards. And I like the fact that he was respectful enough to say, do you want to talk about it here, or should we go and talk about it in private? She was like, no, yeah, in private. He chased her, you know, he cared to make her feel, reassure her that, you know, these are the reasons, and I think it's the sensible reason. Better than what Zainab did. She could have also said, Cole, I'm not gonna marry you, but let's talk about it in private. There was no mutual respect when it came to Zainab, but at least Bartise had that respect, and that's saying a lot, because it's Bartise. I mean, it's saying a lot for what Zainab really did at this altar. She could have been more mature about it, but she wasn't. And I respected Nancy for, you know, she talked to him, but then for her to be like, the relationship is done, I don't see the point in that, because they've only known each other for a short period of time, and they've got all these uncertainties on Bartise's side. There was nothing else that was an added problem other than him saying no. And they've known each other for a short period of time. I mean, she should understand why he might say no, having that he was trying to pull through it and lie to himself. I don't think he was so much gaslighting her as much as he was not being honest to himself, because he felt like she was such a good girl and like he should want her. She should be enough for him, but he couldn't get over the fact that as a young man, he wanted to explore himself sexually, physically. He wanted to try and be, have an opportunity not to settle for somebody he doesn't feel ultimately attracted to, which is fine. Let him go through his stages. But I don't see why she was like all of a sudden so disrespected and felt so the need to like, no, like in the interviews after the reunion saying, oh, I wouldn't call it friendship. Like I can tolerate him if he's in the same room, but like we talk. Other than that, we're not really friends. But it's like she didn't have any of those issues. She didn't say she felt abused. She didn't feel like he treated her badly, he was hurting her, any of that, really enough so that she was willing to end that relationship, that friendship before, until he said no. Why does him saying no change everything all of a sudden? Would I lost respect for her? I mean, I felt like that was pretty immature, that she felt rejected at the altar and therefore the entire relationship is done, but also that she just like would let go of the friendship then, because I would think that they would stay friends, but she then didn't want to like say anything to his face, and instead jumped on Cole as the scapegoat, making his situation so much worse. I lost respect for Nancy at that point. And that's pretty much it. SK sitting there, oh my god, a little bit of a high horse like Brennon, because they kept the relationship going and we find out it's fake. So if I feel like both SK and Braven were both in on it for business opportunities, sponsorship, becoming insta famous, then I mean, who can blame? I don't really know how much Raven really cares, how much like she was detached to the situation, because I honestly don't get why she would have wanted to be with him anyway, with all the faults that people were pointing out. He was gonna be a student, he was gonna move away to California, so why he was on the show in the first place, wanting to get married, it's a bad time, he shouldn't have been on the show. I mean, like, she didn't really seem attracted to him at first, and then all of a sudden apparently she found out he had more money and she was more attracted to him, and I don't really think that she genuinely wanted to integrate into this culture. But for what reason she was putting up with it, I mean, maybe, again, sponsorship opportunities, blah, blah, blah. I don't really think that she was, like, so into him that she would have been heartbroken that he, like, was cheating or whatever. So, anyway, those are my thoughts and insights. Almost 2 hours long. I think it's the longest one I've seen so far. But hopefully some of you guys watched to this point, and if you do, I truly think you're an amazing person. And hopefully you will comment on some of your thoughts and insights, and tell me if there's anything that I missed that you thought of, that you were affected by. See you in the next one. Peace out.